Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with Riot Kent back again, and surprise, it's a Tuesday, and here's a B patch rundown. Hooray! With this being a 3-week period because of some circumstances for Riot, we didn't want to leave the meta in kind of a weird state for this long, so we made a B patch. Hooray! So Kent,
Yeah.
yeah, how you doing?
I also just want to say Mort also, treats his viewers extremely well because it was like, this V patch is bigger than our usual V patches. Let's make a rundown. And so he put together slides really quick and was like, Kent, 8 p.m. Do you have time? And we put together this rundown. So, Mort's very, very dedicated to TFT.
Anyway, yeah. So TLDR here, what we saw in the meta was not great. A lot of there were like 5 or 6 really good comps, but the gap between those 5 or 6 really good comps and everything else was like the Grand Canyon. It was a pretty wide gap. And at the bottom of that gap, at the very bottom, drowning in the little puddles at the bottom of the Grand Canyon was like Astral. So like there are definitely some comps that were just like really bad. And so we want to make some changes to try to sandwich it all together, bring down the top, bring up the bottom. We got it. This isn't everything we wanted to do. There are going to be things, especially bug fixes, Aurelian Soul, because he's waiting on the rework, that we didn't get to. But hopefully these changes get us in a better spot.
Yeah, there we definitely weren't okay leaving the game in this state for another 2 weeks. And so, definitely want to tighten both bands, as Mort mentioned.
All right. Well, let's get through this so this video is not too long here. Right away with traits. Ken, you want to take the first one?
Yeah. Okay. Some people are gonna love this. Assassin players might be a little bit sad, but assassins now jump even earlier before other units move. So the way assassins currently works is they will jump. Enemy units will take a little bit of time and then start moving. And so often, and not always, they will land around those units that started moving. If you put melee units in the backline, you can sometimes bait assassins, sometimes you can't. Now you will very, very reliably be able to bait those assassins. If you clump in a corner, that's the counterplay that you get to play for this set. But obviously there's trade-offs with take more damage from AoE, things like Corki, Zaya, those kinds of things. But that's the trade-off you get to make. And if you make this trade-off for assassins, it really will pay off.
Yeah, the big thing to note here, and you're going to see this in the rest of the rundown here, is you're not going to see an Olaf nerf, and you're not going to see a Talon nerf. Olaf in particular, we think is only strong while he's an assassin right now. When he's not an assassin, he's not that oppressive. And then Talon in particular also kind of with this. So this is kind of the nerf that hits both of them, as well as some other changes later. But just calling that out now, that's why we didn't want to like destroy all possibility here. But this is a pretty big nerf to assassin.
Yep. It's a really, really big nerf, but it's something that we felt we needed to do because it just feels really bad when you do feel like you're counterplaying assassins and you position properly, then it doesn't pay off. And so this should make the whole interaction feel a lot better, and we'll balance around that.
Yep. All right, moving on to Astral. If you've played Astral before, there's some power we need to solve too, but one of the most annoying things is that in Stage 2, you're kind of waiting for that first Astral shop that you usually get around 2.5, 2.6. It's a really important shop, and the difference between it having 2 Astral units and 5 Astral units is so massive that can literally make or break your game, especially when that Astral shop then has like Nami and Varus instead of those 1 costs you need. So we're trying to lower the variance here a little bit for a comp that really needs help. And now every Astral shop will have 3 Astral units minimum. There's still the 4 and the 5s, but no more of the 2s, which should help with the variance of Astral not quite be as bad.
Yeah, Astral, especially in the early game, was astronomically bad. But we are making this change to help with that, along with some other early game changes to make sure that Astral and both as a vertical and as like an early game opener is something viable, and you'll actually buy the units in your shop.
Yep. All right, Cannoneer. This is one that might surprise you, but you're going to have to take it within everything else here, because everyone's looking at this and going, Corki buffs, what? But the reality is the power distribution of like Corki and the comps that he played was really heavily in Corki and not as much in his traits. Cannoneer in particular, we saw basically nobody want any more than 3 Cannoneer. It was kind of a bait. So 2 Cannoneer stays the same, but as you go up, the buff gets bigger and bigger. So 3, 4, 5. If you want to go 5 Cannoneer now, that should be much more worth it. And you'll see we're pulling power in other places later to kind of help shift that power overall. But we do want Cannoneer vertical to be a thing, so here you go.
Yeah, we saw like even with high level players who get to the end game, they drop more and more of their cannoneers to play two cannoneers, then play a bunch of other end game units. And so we want vertical cannon to actually be able to pay off, especially if you go really deep into it.
All right, Dragonmancer, the becoming less and less secret OP comp of level 6. Your Rush 6 Dragonmancer, it's very, very strong, whether it be Swain, Lee Sin, Volibear, it barely matters. These changes look pretty complicated, but let's talk about them and show what they mean. But basically, the idea here is that we're making Dragonmancer scale more with star levels. So you'll get more HP and AP off the base with star levels, but less base. And so I'm going to change it to the next slide here right now to show you. And you can kind of see the before and after. The yellow highlights here are the, like, if everything is 2-starred in your 3 Dragonmancer comp, your 6 Dragonmancer comp, your 9 Dragonmancer comp. And you can kind of see the impact here. But basically, it's a nerf if your star levels are a lot lower. So for example, let's say you run 6 Dragonmancer and they're all 1-star. You lose 500 health here and 20 AP basically. So 500 health and 20 AP off your Swain or your Lee Sin is a pretty good chunk. Get them all to 2-star, and that drops to about 400 health and like 15 AP. So pretty big nerf for 6 especially. For 3, not really as big a nerf. In fact, with 3, you can see that the AP actually goes up pretty quickly if you put like a 4th Dragonmancer in. So some 3 Dragonmancer plays should be good. And 9 Dragonmancer, really not that nerfed. You can see it's kind of about the same. But this was mostly targeted around 6 Dragonmancer and 1-star Dragonmancer compositions. So
Yeah, we found that players, they hit level 6 on stage 3-2, roll down, hit the 6 Dragonmancers with their 1-star, Lee Sin, Swain, Volibear, kind of anything, and just kind of dominated that stage, and even onwards, with a bunch of 1-star 1-star Dragonmancers. And so this change makes it so that you actually have to scale up, and so you're still going to be really strong and dominant. And that's kind of why Dragonmancer is good, but it's more reliant on you actually hitting your units and being able to scale a little bit later. So the nerf is, as Mort mentioned, a lot smaller later than it is when you hit it for the first time in stage 3.
Yep. Now, it's still pretty small overall. I think we could have gone harder, but you'll see we're also hitting some of the champions, and we didn't want to, like, gut it. We did run some sims, so hopefully should be in a good spot, but let's keep going. On to Revel. Revel is the kind of trait where right now we're seeing 2 and 3 be extremely dominant early. Whether, you get the Tahm Kench, the Jinx, and because it's flat damage, it's very, very powerful. But if you can hit that like 4 or even 5, it's not really as worth. So again, shifting that power a bit, nerfing, very small nerfs here, very tiny adjustments. But 2 and 3 Revel go down just a little bit, so they won't quite be as early game dominant. But if you can go all the way up to 5, maybe get an emblem, you can do a lot of damage here. I think Revel emblem in particular will be pretty exciting. But yeah, this should be a fine adjustment to Revel.
Yep, I think you covered everything for this one.
Cool. Scale Scorn, pretty similar actually. To Scale Scorn, the thing to remember is it's giving you that 20% DR against high health units, which there are a lot of this set, so it's making your Dianas, your Olafs even tankier. And that, in addition to the 20% damage, was a little much, so we're bringing down the damage 5%, so it goes from 20 to 15. But 6 Scale Scorn, which is a pretty hard to hit chase trait, requiring 2 augments or emblems or whatever, was never really worth and not really an exciting chase trait. So if you're willing to go 6 Scale Scorn, we want to make sure that payoff is worth it here. So that gets a pretty big buff if you're willing to go that very deep vertical Scale Scorn.
Yeah, we virtually saw nobody going like really investing in Scale Scorn, choosing to go to the other traits for whenever they're playing, Olaf or Diana. And so this is to make it so that that is an option that you can go towards, and maybe you can have some creative uses with those Scale Scorn emblems.
Yep. Whispers. If I was worried about one change in this patch, it might be this one. We'll see. Whispers has been on a wild ride from its PvE days, and it ended up in a spot where 2 Whispers is very much worth because, you do the damage, you get the armor and magic resist penetration, which is really good. But going and beyond that wasn't really worth for like an extra 1, 2 AP and AD per attack. So we buffed 4 and 6 by 1 and 8 by 2. But if you think about it another way, it's like it is a big like 50% damage for 4 here. Pretty big buff for 8 as well. Hopefully this makes Whispers pretty good. This is probably a pretty large buff to some Elise comps, which could be really cool. Some Elise Siphon comps. But really, we want to get Vertical Whispers back in the meta anyway. Hoping this isn't too much, but we'll see.
Yeah, a lot of times we just see whispers being used for that armor and armor reduction. And, in PvE, we had a lot of whispers, emblems, creative uses, and fun uses with it. It was overpowered at the time, but then, we brought it down a lot. And now we're not seeing any of it. And, it's supposed to be one of our more exciting emblems. And so with this change, hopefully there are some whispers comps that comes out with creative uses of the emblem.
Yep. All right, on to the champs. Ezreal, just really tiny adjustment here. At 1 star, we were seeing him do just a tiny bit less damage than we wanted him to, so gets 5 spell power, nothing big. At 2 star, just a little more than we wanted, so minor buff here of -10. And then at 3 star, we're still seeing him a little more powerful than we want him, especially with like an Archangel and some pretty good scaling. So bumping that down -15. This is a 5% damage nerf. Shouldn't be a huge thing, but should get Ezreal pretty much right where we want him. I can't imagine we change Ezreal again from here.
Yep.
Cool. Skarner, another one of the Astral champions. When you compared Skarner to Tahm Kench, it was pretty abysmal, which kind of makes sense because, Skarner's more likely to be 3-starred, and we're okay with Tahm Kench 3 being significantly better than Skarner 3. But even at 2-star, the comparison was real bad. Skarner was basically the 2nd or 3rd worst champion in the game, kind of riding off the coattails of 2 Bruiser with Tahm Kench, where he was played, but not really by himself, and that was really hurting Astral. So we're buffing him up a pretty sizable amount here with the Spell Shield. Should make him a little tankier. Nothing too crazy. I don't think we're going to see like Skarner dominate the early game or anything, but this should give you an option and make Skarner a little bit more worth more investing in.
Yeah, if you do the comparison here to Tahm Kench, there'll be a lot more similar with Tahm Kench. With some more investment, he'll be better. But with Skarner, you can kind of play him with the Astral comp where you might be itemizing Alawi or something like that, and Skarner will provide a lot more value for you. But even if you do itemize him, there should be some really fun builds with this Rock Lobster.
Yep. All right, Tahm Kench, probably the best, most OP stage 1 2-star unit in the game. Definitely the best front line, does a decent amount of damage, especially if you have 2 Revel turned on. Him combined with a trainer start is just like so much power. Again, just compared to all the other front lines early game, he was just a little too strong. So we're bringing him down here. He loses 50 base HP, nothing too crazy. And then the Spell Shield. Now, these Spell Shield numbers might look big, but the thing to remember is Tahm Kench also shields himself for 10% of his max HP. We didn't touch that. So, for example, at 2-star, I think his base HP will now be like 1,300 or something. That's an extra 130 on top of it. And that's not assuming items or traits. He's a bruiser that can get his shield even bigger. Slap a Sunfire and a Warmogs on this guy, and his shields are still really massive. I still expect him to be quite good. Certainly better than Skarner at like an equality level as soon as you put items on him. So this is a nerf, but I don't think he's going to go anywhere as far as like a really good start.
Yeah, just as a reminder, like Tahm Kench is really, really strong. So we are looking to nerf him, but we didn't want to touch that, the funner part of it where it's like you can make his health really big and you can get a massive shield. But we wanted to nerf like, his baseline. And so this does end up as a net nerf, just not as big as it looks just from the spell shield numbers.
Yep. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Vladimir, probably the worst champ in the set right now, for sure. And so we needed to, I think Vlad's worse, but anyway, we need to bring Vlad up, try to get him on the same level as some of those other early tanks like Tahm Kench, Skarner, Leona, etc. And so gets a pretty big buff here. 50 extra HP, 5 extra armor and MR, a really big healing buff at 1-star. It scales less at 2 and 3-star, but overall this should make Vlad actually a comparable unit, and this should help both Astral and Mage in the early game be able to reach their end game point where they're a bit stronger. Because really, the early game Astral, if you tried to play Vlad, your round win rate was like 35% at best. So this should help a lot.
Yeah, we're seeing both Astral and Mage really struggle right now. And so, him being a key unit in the early game for that to help you save HP, he really needed these buffs to help you sustain and get later into the game where you can actually build your end game comp.
Yep. All right, Lillia. Why don't you talk about Lillia?
Yeah, Lillia is a fun one. So Lillia is kind of struggling right now, not just because her damage numbers are not very high, but also because she's got this weird bug where she'll bonk with Mage, she'll bonk one unit next to her and bonk another unit next to her. just because her targeting isn't consistent. So we're bug fixing that so that she always bonks her combat target. This way she can actually like kill things and start to dash and run through the comp as a cavalier. But in addition to that, we're also making it so that she bonks a little bit more. 0 out of 60 mana becomes 0 out of 50, and we're increasing her spell area damage from 175, 250, 350 to 215, 275, 350. This is the damage that she deals in an AoE, but it's dispersed around all the units hit. And then we're taking some of the damage away from the center unit, which is the unit that's in the center of her blast that takes the full damage undispersed. And so this kind of distributes her damage to deal a little bit more AoE, but prevents her from being too much of like a one-shot carry, even though she still kind of will be that. We didn't want her to be like, we didn't want to just over buff that single target carry potential from Lillia.
Yep. This is expected to be a buff, to be clear. We think Lillia will be quite a bit stronger now. Interestingly enough, this also opens up another blue buff user. With at 50 mana, blue buff is actually a pretty decent item. So consider that if you want. But yeah, overall, hopefully Lillia should be an option now as a carry at a 2-cost unit. So, yeah. Kiana, very tiny nerf here. Kiana providing a lot of utility to backline assassins. That disarm time is pretty long, pretty, aggravating. Can honestly decide fights if like it hits Xayah during the Rage Wing, during that Rage Wing window and you lose all those feathers. So it can be pretty devastating, but just a really tiny nerf just to get her to cast a little less often. No big deal.
Yep. That's it.
Cool. All right, on to 3-cost. Diana. I think Diana is carrying a lot of the weight. I mean, everyone focuses on Olaf, but Diana does a lot of damage, especially now that we fixed the spell scaling and how multiplicative it is with assassins. You run an IE and a death cap on a Diana 2, and that spell was wiping 1 to 2 units full. It's just a lot of damage. So we want to bring that down, and we're starting with, a pretty sizable chunk, which is 1 less orb. The goal here is that if Diana casts her spell and chunks out 1 key unit, that's correct. That's probably right where we want her if you've got items on this Diana. If you don't have items, it probably shouldn't chunk a unit fully. But this should, combined with the Scale Scorn 2 change, hopefully bring Diana down to a healthier level.
Yeah, the direction we wanted to go here was we definitely wanted to nerf Diana's damage just because as, a half tanky-ish bruiser type, assassin, she was dealing way too much damage. But we didn't want to just directly go and nerf the orb damage, because what we were seeing her do is she gets her orb, she kills people with 4 out of 5 of her, or 5 out of 6 of her orbs, or she has some orbs left over basically, and she walks into the next target and also kills that unit. With this change, she'll use up most of her orbs killing her main target so that the second unit doesn't take as much damage. And that way she's a lot healthier. She's not just mowing through your team. She can kill 1 unit and then absorb a lot of damage, then kind of repeat that process.
Yep. All right, Lee Sin. So I know this is one of those ones that will kind of get reamed a little bit where it's like they're nerfing Dragonmancer and Lee Sin. But the reality is we wanted to split the nerf a little bit so that, we weren't killing all Dragonmancer comps. Some of the power was in Lee Sin. So we go with a bit of a heavier nerf at 1 star so that, if you get a Lee Sin early, it doesn't necessarily carry you all the way to stage 4. A lighter nerf at 2 star and a lighter nerf at 3 star percentage-wise. But really kind of focused mostly on Lee Sin 1 here and bringing down that total damage. Now, again, this could also... There's ways you could consider this a buff as well, because if he doesn't kill the primary target he's kicking, that means he's going to get that splash damage from the knockback. So not too worried about this nerf overall, but did want to bring down that total damage just a little bit.
Yeah, Lee Sin, Dragonmancer in Stage 3 was really strong, so a lot of that power came down from Dragonmancer, and we're just doing a really tiny nerf here.
Yep. Speaking of which, Swain is in a similar boat. Again, we're nerfing 6 Dragonmancer. Swain also double dips a little bit because he gets all that Dragonmancer health that was then being gained from Shapeshifter, giving him a ton of health. So that, 400 or 500 health nerf you saw earlier becomes, 600 to 800 from after a 2 Shapeshifter transformation. So that's a pretty big nerf already. Even still, we were seeing the damage a little high in our sims, especially with other things being brought down. So we're bringing down the damage a little bit. Again, mostly focused around 1 star percentage-wise. 2 star shouldn't be hit quite as hard, and then 3 star. Even though it's minus 10 at all levels, if you think about it from a percentage standpoint, this mostly hits 1 star, little less 2, little less 3.
Yeah, we're mostly trying to tackle that stage 3/6 Dragonmancer power that you just ride your high health into the late game and be able to hit everything that you want to hit.
Yep. Silas. Silas is supposed to be sort of the anchor of the late game mage carry. You want your Silas 2 with tank items to kind of be able to carry that mage comp. And frankly, compared to a lot of the other tanks out there, really wasn't cutting it. The rework was successful and fun. It's just the numbers were a little low tuned. So we're buffing these numbers a pretty sizable amount, actually. So pretty confident Silas will be a lot better here. This also can help the Whispers comp, although Whispers probably isn't anchoring around Silas much. But if you, again, for mages in particular, this should be a nice, mid to late game tank that you can build around.
And a primary buff here is like his reliability, because sometimes in the late game, if he doesn't have good enough items, his second cast won't do this AoE mana reave because his shield will break before he gets his second cast off. Now with the larger shield here, he should more reliably get off the second part of his spell, and it should just make him a better unit in general, because you can believe in yourself. You can believe in him when you put items on him, like he'll always do the thing you want him to do.
Yep. All right, on to the spicy stuff. Corki. Believe it or not, even though Corki is a very strong champion, we don't think him in isolation was necessarily that strong, so not looking to do really big nerfs here. You'll notice we didn't really nerf his spell that much. He still gets the 4 autos. We didn't lower his base AD, so all of that's still there. We just want him casting a little less often, so we lowered his mana by 10, but we actually let him get his first cast off a little sooner. So overall, it shouldn't be too bad here for Corki. And then the big one, base damage, just goes down a little bit here. And again, that's just the base damage. That's not counting about the AD damage. So honestly, I think Corki got off pretty light here, but it is a small nerf to Corki, which again, combined with like the Revel adjustments to early, but higher Cannoneer potential, maybe Corki will be coming out of this just fine.
Yeah, so we made adjustments to his early game. We're making adjustments to some of his frontline that you'll see in just a little bit later, and one of his items, and so kind of went light on this nerf. But he should land in still like a premier 4-cost carry spot. We definitely don't want to take him out or anything like that. So just went light here.
Yep. Ornn. Ornn is the champion no one complains about because he's in every comp, and nobody wants to complain about something they have in their comps. But Ornn was in like every comp. Ornn is very, very good. His traits are amazing. He's one of the best ways to activate 2 Tempest. In isolation, barely needs items. Bruiser's a great trait, has insane stats. And then the Legend version is just fun. We didn't want to nerf the Legend version. We want to keep that, high damage Ornn fun comp around. So we mostly targeted his utility here. The attack speed slow is going to go from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. So he won't quite lock down those backline carries as much. And then if he gets the knock-up part of his spell, that goes down by 0.25 seconds. So really small nerf for Ornn, but it should be a decent amount that brings him down a little bit.
Yeah, just a little nudge down.
Yep. Sona underperforming a little bit. Very light touch here. We didn't want her casting more often. We didn't want you being CC'd more often. So no mana, no attack speed, no anything like that. Just a little bit more base damage. So if you want to invest some AP, maybe especially in 2-star, maybe it's worth it. Maybe there's an AP version of a Revel comp. Maybe this will help like an Invoker comp if you get the right augments. But really light buff to Sona.
Yeah, we're aware that Evoker is going to struggle a little bit before the Aurelion Soul changes that are coming next patch, but we still want there to be some sort of viable options, especially if you get the right items, the right openers, and the right augments for it. And so by giving Sona a bit more damage, she can be a little bit more reliable of a carry for the end game.
Yep. All right, and finally Xayah. Why don't you talk about Xayah?
Yeah, Xayah right now, especially at 1-star, is just dealing way, way too much damage. Frontlines cannot stand up to Xayah because once she, launches all those feathers, pulls it back, that thing, she just wipes out frontlines. And so we're bringing down the base damage and her feather 80%. So her base damage is coming down from 15, 20, 50 to 12, 20, 40. Not really hitting her at 2-star, mainly at 1-star, just because, 1-star with 1 or 2 items early game is just dealing way too much damage. The feather 80% is to tackle the Xayah builds that use the Shimmer Scale item Draven's Axe or Guild Talon to get that bonus AD. She's just benefiting from that so much and dealing so much damage. So we're bringing that down too. And so overall, this is a net nerf. I mean, this is a nerf both at 1-star and 2-star, a larger nerf at 1-star just because of how strong she was at 1-star. And we're specifically also targeting her AD scaling because of the synergies that she has. And those are like the versions of her that are the most dominant.
Yep. You know, this is a big nerf, but in a way, she also kind of got off lightly too. So it'll be interesting to see where she lands. You know, we want her to be a carry. She's supposed to be a very good carry. She's not supposed to be so dominant that 1-star is wiping out 2-star dragons with 1 pullback. So this should bring her down. This should, like I said, hits the guild version. Very curious to see where she ends up. There's a world where next patch we also have to bring back up 6 and 9 Ragewing, because we've seen those versions of Xayah basically disappear. It's all about the guild versions. But we'll see. So this should bring it down, and I think this, of all the changes, is going to open up the meta the most. If it doesn't, and somehow Xayah is still dominant for the next 2 weeks, I want you to call us out on it. Because hopefully that's not the case. Again, still playable, just not as dominant as she is now.
Oh yeah, I really hope Xayah is not still dominant after this, but we'll see.
Yep. If she is, that says a lot. So.
Yep.
All right. Moving on to dragons. Idis. Idis has definitely become the one dragon everyone's willing to really invest in. Clearly the best frontline tank in the game, and gives you a shimmer scale item, and gives your team a shield, and gives your team attack speed. He's just doing it all. Or they're doing it all. I don't know the pronouns. But basically, we still want that. Like, that's what Idis is supposed to be. Like, if you're running Idis plus backline, like, that was the goal. He's just a little too good at it. So we're lowering the damage reduction during the spell, which is really high numbers. If you think about it, Leona 3 is 60 damage reduction during her spell. This was 75 at 2-star and 50 at 1-star. That is a lot of damage reduction, which can make Idis feel invincible on top of things like Gargoyle, Dragon Claw, things like that. So we're nerfing that pretty hard here. That's probably the biggest nerf here. That's a big nerf. The ally spell shield we're bringing down a little bit, about 10%. That's a little less of a nerf. That one's not supposed to be as much of a nerf. We do want them to have the support to buff their allies. And then giving their team less attack speed during that shield duration. Because keep in mind, they get that shield duration as long as their shield held, which meant, especially because they're all stuck on Idis, it's just a lot of power. And so we're bringing Idis down. Still want Idis to be premier. If you get a level 5 Idis, you should still be happy. Just not quite as unbeatable as it was before.
Yeah, the ultimate, plug-in frontline tank that gives you an item was just really, really tanky and super oppressive in the early stages because of how high that damage reduction was. Everyone's auto attacks were, not that high yet because it's early game. You don't have a lot of items. And so basically immortal during that spell. So with this coming down, Idis should be a lot more susceptible to damage and a lot less oppressive in the early stages of the game.
Yep. For the other dragons, why am I blanking? Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu we actually think is going to be very strong after all these changes, so we didn't want to buff them anymore. I think they're going to be really strong now that Xayah and Corki are brought down especially, so expect to see some Xiaoyu. Deja we think needed a small buff to her wave damage, but the reality is because we already touched the file once in a micro patch, we couldn't do it again, so we're going to save that for 12.13, so expect Deja buffs in 12.13. That leaves Siphon. Siphon was definitely the underperformer of the 4 dragons. Looked really bad in the data. The combination of the Whispers buff, this AD buff, being able to cast a little bit more often, and a bigger buff at 1-star, smaller buff at 2-star, all of this combined should bring Siphon right back into the meta. We want Siphon to be a champion you're excited for. Again, a level 5 Idis should be good. A level 5 Siphon should be just as good. You should be excited to get this. So we want to make that the case. Hopefully these changes get us there.
Yep. I think you covered everything on that.
Cool. All right, that's it for champs. On to a few last minute changes. Giant Slayer overperforming a little bit. It's the 1% damage amp. It's a very universal item. Just bringing it down 5% at each level. It shouldn't quite be the easy auto include. Now it should actually be something you consider a little bit more. And then Sunfire was the other big one, early game. Just a lot of power in that item. It really didn't need to be 40% of a Warmogs and Sunfire. So just bringing that down to 30% of a Warmogs.
Yeah, and with Giant Slayer, you'll see that it's a larger nerf for the base damage than it is for the amplified damage. And that's just because, we're seeing people slam this immediately as soon as they get a Giant Slayer. And it's giving, obviously it's going to be good for you later in the game, but it shouldn't be giving you as much value as it is in the early game. And so we're bringing that down a little bit so that it's less tempting to do that. And, maybe you consider waiting, maybe you consider some other item choices rather than saving your sword and your bow exclusively for Giant Slayer.
Yep. All right, on to augments and bug fixes. So we removed 2 augments, the first of which is Dragonmancer Heart. And this was because the amount of power it was providing for a silver augment was pretty insane. It allowed you to basically, instead of having to run Volibear, you could run something like a Gnar, which would give you 3 Jade on top of everything else. Or you could run a Ragewing and get 3 Ragewing for your Swain at level 6. Both of those were just really massive spikes. Now, yes, you can do that with like the emblem, for example, at gold, but that requires a little bit more, and that's gold power. For silver, that was just too much power. And then on the other end of the spectrum, Astral Soul was a prismatic that gave you +1 Astral, which did nothing because you wanted to 3-star all your Astrals anyway. And for a prismatic, it was a giant bait. So we removed both of those just to, try to level things off here.
Yeah, with Dragonmancer, we considered the option of switching Heart and Crest because that's what we have done in the past. Because when the Heart is better, it lets you reach another level and be able to do other things. But the thing with the Crest is that the Crest is it gives you the same thing, other than helping you reach Dragonmancer 9 at level 8, but also it opens up so many different variations of the comp, and it's like so much more fun. And so we wanted to keep that in the game. There's a lot of different Dragonmancer carries out there that you can make work, and you can just play Dragonmancer in so many different ways if you hit that Crest. And so wanted to keep that fun in the game.
Yep. And then finally, removing a bit of an exploit here, where if you put Crown of Champions on in the middle of combat, it would instantly trigger. Some players were abusing this, really didn't want this in the game, so we snuck in the fix to make sure this would go away. So no more treating Crown of Champions.
No exploits.
Cool. And that's it. That's the B patch. It should go live Tuesday, noon PST, and then that'll be it until July 13th. There will certainly not be a C patch, as we won't be around to do it, even if we wanted one. So this is what you get for the next 2 weeks. Fingers crossed that it works out well. Again, we had plenty of time to prepare this, he said with a lot of sarcasm. And yeah, so Kent, any closing thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, just we have high hopes for this patch. We definitely had really lofty goals and didn't have a lot of time to go through all of it, but we had a lot of people on deck working really hard to try to get this right. And I'm pretty confident that by at least even just bringing down the top, the better will feel a lot better. No more 4 Xayah players per game, that kind of thing. So it'll feel good.
Yep. All right, that's gonna do it from us. On behalf of the whole TFT team, have a great 2 weeks, and until next time, take it easy.